Park Jin-ho nodded once. Two men appeared from the edges of the room, walked to the kneeling man with the efficiency of people who had done this many times, and removed him without a word. The door closed. The room returned to silence. Jin-ho reached for his water and took a slow, unbothered sip. 5 men sat around the table. None of them moved. That was the thing about Park Jin-ho. People expected loudness. What they got was this: a nod, a sip of water, a room full of men trying to remember how to breathe. He stood. The meeting was over. He was halfway down the east corridor when his phone rang. Ignored. Rang again. Ignored. Third time he answered without slowing his pace. "Sir?" It was Shin. Shin did not call unless it was necessary. "There is a Ghanaian woman at the front gate. Elderly. Arrived alone. No appointment." Jin-ho kept walking. "She says the girl has eyes like yours. The same condition." He stopped. 4 seconds of complete silence. "Bring her inside. East. Meeting room. No staff present." He ended the call.
An elderly Ghanaian woman just walked into the most dangerous compound in Seoul with just 3 sentences, and somehow she made Park Jin-ho stop everything. What she knows is about to unravel 24 years of buried secrets, and nobody in this family is ready for what comes next. Real quick, are you watching this on your phone, TV, or laptop? And if you are enjoying this already, make sure you hit subscribe before we go any further.
Florence Mensah had walked into dangerous places before, but those places had the danger of indifference. This compound had the danger of intention. She noticed everything as the bodyguards walked her through. Cameras at every angle, staff moving without speaking, silence that had been constructed and maintained like everything else here. She was not afraid. She had not flown from Accra to Seoul to be afraid now. The room they placed her in was cold and sparse. 1 table, 2 chairs, designed to make a person feel temporary. Florence sat down, folded her hands, and waited. Jin-ho entered alone. He sat across from her with the ease of a man who had conducted difficult conversations his entire life and found none of them surprising. He said nothing. He waited. Florence looked at his eyes. The condition was unmistakable up close, a rare pigmentation that gave the iris a layered depth. She had looked into those same eyes across a breakfast table in Accra for 24 years. "She is 24 years old." Jin-ho did not respond. "She has your eyes." Silence. "And she believes her father is dead." Something moved in his jaw, brief and controlled. Most people would have missed it. Florence did not. "You don't remember her mother." Not a question. An accusation placed quietly between them. Something passed behind his eyes. Not shock. Something older. He buried it immediately, but it had been there, and they both knew Florence had seen it. "You chose a dangerous place to tell me this." Florence did not blink. "I chose the only place where you would have to listen." Jin-ho's eyes moved to her hands, then back to her face. He was reading her, calculating what she wanted, what leverage she carried. She was carrying nothing. No documents. No photographs. Just truth, delivered to a man who had spent his entire adult life making truth disappear. That was what unsettled him. "Her mother," he said. "Tell me." Florence did not rush. Her name was Han Ye-jin, graduate student, international trade. She was 22 when she met you, and 23 when she understood that meeting you had cost her everything. Jin-ho's hand on the table became very still. She did not leave willingly. She was told to leave, told what would happen to her and the child if she stayed. She was frightened enough to believe it. "She went to Accra," Jin-ho said. Not a question. "She went where she had family. She rebuilt. She was a good mother. She never once spoke badly of you to Elizabeth. She believed what you had was real before it was taken from you both. The word taken landed and did not leave. She died 7 years ago. A car accident. A Tuesday morning. Elizabeth was 17. No warning. No goodbye. Jinho said nothing. Why now? He asked finally. Because Elizabeth is here, in Seoul. She came for work, not for answers. But she is here, and she deserves to know that the story she was told about her father is not the whole story. What story? Was she told? That you were gone. That the people around you made certain you would never know she existed. Florence held his gaze. I am here to find out if that is true. The longest silence yet. Jinho stood and walked to the far wall, his hands loose at his sides. Florence waited. She understood that what was moving through him required space. When he turned back, his face had settled into something new. Not softness. The expression of a man who has just located a wound he had spent years being unable to find. Where is she? Mapogu. 3 months. Does she know you're here? No. He nodded once. Then, you should go. Florence rose and walked to the door. She paused without turning around. She is not a complication. She is your daughter, and she has your eyes every single day, whether you choose to see her or not. She left. Jinho stood alone. He took out his phone. Pull everything on a woman named Elizabeth. Ghanaian Korean. 24. Currently employed. In Seoul. Do it quietly. Tell no one. He ended the call and stood in the silence of what he had just set in motion. The file arrived at 6:14 in the morning. Jinho was already awake. He sat at his desk in the private office, the city still dark beyond the window, and opened it. Employment records first. 11 weeks with a pharmaceutical documentation firm in Yeouido. Her supervisor had used words like precise and reliable and self-sufficient. Her performance reviews noted she asked good questions and never asked them twice. Immigration documents, clean entry, work authorization in order, then the photograph, employee profile, neutral background. She was looking directly at the camera with the composure of someone who had learned early that the world responded better to steadiness than to need. Her face was round and warm, and her eyes. Jinho looked at the photograph for a long time. He had the disorienting experience of recognizing something in a face he had never seen before. Not familiarity. Something more anatomical, like looking at a structure and knowing it from the inside. He closed the file, opened it again. Then he picked up his phone and told his driver to bring the car around. The Yeouido office building had a lobby Jinho walked through without pausing. His aide prosecutor fell into step beside him. Subsidiary compliance review, 14th floor, unannounced. Prosecutor did not ask questions. That was why he had lasted 8 years. The elevator opened onto an open-plan office that registered their arrival the way offices always did. A ripple of awareness. Postures straightening. Eyes suddenly very focused on screens. Jinho moved through the floor slowly. He turned into the eastern corridor. Elizabeth came around the corner with a folder tucked under her arm, and her eyes on a document she was reading. 3 steps in, she registered the 2 men in front of her and stopped. She looked up and apologized quickly in Korean that was grammatically correct and slightly formal in the way second-language speakers become formal when startled. Jinho looked at her eyes. She looked at his, standing 4 feet apart in a narrow corridor with morning light coming through the window behind her. The similarity was not subtle. It was the kind of thing that once seen could not be unseen. Elizabeth felt the intensity of his gaze without understanding it. Something about being looked at that directly, not with aggression, but with a focused stillness, made her feel briefly as though she had been recognized by someone who had no reason to recognize her. The moment lasted 3 seconds. Prosecutor spoke. Sir, the review documents are ready. Jinho broke his gaze. Good. He walked past her. Elizabeth turned slightly and watched him continue down the corridor. She stood there a moment longer than she needed to, unsettled in a way she could not immediately name. Then she looked down at the document in her hand and made herself continue walking. The alert reached Park Sunj at 11:20 that morning. His residence was older than the main compound. Traditional furniture, a garden outside maintained with obsessive precision, the kind of home that reflected its owner's psychology exactly. The man who delivered the alert was named Wu, 26 years of service. He placed a single printed page beside Sunj's tea without speaking. Sunj read it without picking it up. An unusual investigation originating inside Jinho's security network. Marked private. Routed outside standard reporting channels. A young woman, Ghanaian Korean, 24, employed at a Yoido subsidiary. He set down his tea with a care that was almost ceremonial. He sat with it for 60 seconds. Not because he needed the time to process. He had processed it in the first 10. He sat with it because the space between receiving information and acting on it was where most people made their mistakes. Then he looked at Wu. Find out everything about her. Employment, residence, immigration status, who she has spoken to since arriving in Seoul. Eitkisa, pause. Do it before my son does. Wu left without a word. Sunj looked back at the garden. The groundskeeper was trimming the far hedge with the same methodical patience he brought to it every week. Everything in its correct shape. Everything exactly where it was supposed to be. He picked up his tea. He had managed this family's complications for 40 years. He saw no reason this one would be any different. Elizabeth discovered the flag on a Wednesday afternoon. She logged into the immigration compliance portal to check her work authorization renewal and found a status indicator she had not seen before. Review pending. No explanation. No timeline. She closed the browser and opened it again. It was not a loading error. She called the compliance office and waited 11 minutes on hold before a representative told her flags of this nature were typically administrative and typically resolved within 4 to 6 weeks, but could not confirm the specific reason or guarantee the timeline. Typically, could not confirm, could not guarantee. She thanked the representative, ended the call, and sat very still at her desk. 4 to 6 weeks of uncertainty over her right to work meant 4 to 6 weeks of uncertainty over everything she had built here. She had come to Seoul with a plan. She had executed it carefully. The ground beneath it was not supposed to move. That evening, she called Florence from her apartment window, the city lights below, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has spent a day holding something together through willpower alone. Grandma, something is wrong with my papers. Everything was in order when I arrived. I don't understand what changed. Florence was quiet on the other end. A specific kind of quiet. Not thinking, deciding. Elizabeth, she said, I need to tell you something. That tone stopped Elizabeth immediately. In 71 years, Florence Mensah had developed exactly one tone that meant what followed. Could not be managed in small pieces. Elizabeth had heard it once before. The day her mother was gone. She sat down on the edge of her bed and waited. Florence told her everything. Han Yejin. The relationship that had been real before it had been ended by force. The threats. The disappearance. The years of silence maintained not by choice, but by fear. The car accident that took Yejin on an ordinary Tuesday morning without warning or ceremony. And 4 years ago, the decision Florence had made to find the man her daughter had loved and never fully stopped grieving. She told her about the compound, the bodyguards, the cold room, the man who had sat across from her with eyes that Elizabeth saw in her own mirror every morning. Elizabeth listened without interrupting. Outside her window, the city moved with complete indifference to what was happening inside the apartment. When Florence finished, the silence on the line lasted long enough that Florence said her name once, gently. "You went alone," Elizabeth said. Her voice was controlled in the way voices become controlled when the alternative is something harder to contain. "You flew to Seoul and walked into that place alone, and you didn't tell me. I needed to see him first. I needed to know what kind of man he was before I put you anywhere near him. And what kind of man is he?" Florence considered it. The kind that has done damage and knows it. Elizabeth looked at her hands. "Does he know about me?" "He knows." "Has he made contact?" "Not yet." She stood and walked back to the window. Below, a woman crossed the street with a child on her back, moving quickly against the cold. Ordinary and complete. "The papers," Elizabeth said. "You think this is connected. I think your father is not the only person in that family who knows you exist." The implications settled into the room slowly. Smoke under a door. "What do I do?" Elizabeth asked. "Nothing yet," Florence said. "Wait." Jinho received the doctor's report the following morning. The private clinic in Gangnam did not advertise and did not accept walk-ins. The doctor who ran it had treated the Park family for 17 years and understood that his value to them was not merely clinical. He placed the document on the desk and stepped back without being asked. Jinho picked it up and read it once. 99.999% probability of paternity. He set it down, looked at the middle distance the way a man looks when he is not seeing the room but something further back. Something interior and long unresolved. The doctor said nothing. 17 years had taught him that silence was the only correct response to moments like this. Jinho folded the document cleanly and placed it inside his jacket. This conversation did not happen. "It never does," the doctor said. He drove back to the compound himself. No driver. He needed the 40 minutes of the city moving past the windows without anyone in the car requiring anything from him. He had built everything he owned on certainty, on knowing the full weight of a situation before committing to a direction. He had not made a significant decision in 20 years without complete information. He had complete information now. He arrived at no conclusions. Sunj's team delivered their report that same afternoon. He read it in the east sitting room with the garden visible through the window behind him. Everything Florence had told Jinho. Han Yejin, the daughter, the Accra years, the car accident, the grandmother's 4-year search. He read it twice, then he set it aside and activated his first move. A quiet word to an immigration compliance officer. A flag placed on Elizabeth's work authorization. Nothing dramatic. Just a bureaucratic delay designed to apply pressure on her employment status. To make Seoul feel unstable. To make leaving feel like the practical choice. He also placed someone inside her office building. Not to threaten. To watch and report. He did not tell Jinho. Sunj understood one thing above all else. Jinho was moving towards something emotional, and emotional men moved. Carelessly. The flag would buy time. Time was all he needed to manage this the way he had managed everything else. Quietly. Before it became a shape that could not be reduced. He looked back at the garden. The groundskeeper had finished the far hedge and moved to the gate posts. Precise and unhurried. Sunj picked up his tea. 3 days passed. Elizabeth went to work. Checked her immigration portal twice daily. Found the same status each time. Review pending. She did not tell her colleagues. She did not show the anxiety at her desk. She carried it the way she had learned to carry difficult things, privately and without theater. On the 4th evening, her phone showed an unknown number. She looked at it for a moment, then answered. The voice was measured and low. "This is Park Jinho. I want you to know I am not calling to pressure you. I am calling because you deserve to hear it directly from me." A pause. "The test results came back this morning. I think you already know what they say." Elizabeth said nothing. "I would like to meet. Somewhere public. Somewhere you choose. I will come alone. The city hummed outside her window. She had come to Seoul with a plan. A clean, practical, forward-moving plan. None of this was part of it. I'll send you a location, she said. Give me 2 days. She ended the call before he could respond and sat in the quiet of her apartment, with the phone face down on her knee. She did not call Florence that night. She needed to sit with it alone first, to let it settle into whatever shape it was going to take before she put words around it. Outside the window, Seoul continued without her. Enormous and indifferent, and completely unaware that somewhere in a Mapogu studio apartment, a 24-year-old woman was quietly rearranging everything she thought she knew about where she came from. 2 days later, Elizabeth sent a single message. Cafe Onion, Yeonam-dong, 2 p.m. Come alone. She arrived 20 minutes early and chose a window table with a clear view of the entrance. She ordered barley tea she did not particularly want and held the cup with both hands and watched the door. The cafe was small and warm. Mismatched chairs, afternoon light coming through the glass at a low angle. The kind of place that had no idea what was about to happen inside it. Jinho walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. No aide, no driver visible outside. He wore a dark coat and moved through the small space with the automatic authority of a man who occupied rooms differently from other people, though he was clearly trying to minimize it today. He saw her immediately. He sat down across from her. Up close, without the corridor or the compound between them, they were simply 2 people at a small table. The eye condition was unmistakable at this distance. Neither acknowledged it directly, neither needed to. Elizabeth spoke first. I came to Seoul for work, not for this. I know. I want you to understand that before anything else is said, I had a life here that was functioning. I had a plan. I understand. She looked at him steadily. My mother loved you. Florence told me. I don't know what to do with that yet. Something moved through his expression. Not performance. Something that had been sitting unaddressed for a long time and had no clean way to surface. Neither do I, he said. The cafe made its small sounds around them. A chair scraping. Someone laughing at the counter. The ordinary texture of a city that had no idea what was sitting at the window table. She never spoke badly of you, Elizabeth said. Whatever was done to her, she never let it make her bitter toward you specifically. I used to wonder why. She paused. I think I understand it better now. Jinho was quiet for a moment. I was told she was gone. I believed it because I was 20 years old, and because believing it was easier than the alternative. The alternative being? Looking for her. Elizabeth received that at its full weight. She did not soften it for him, and she did not make it harder than it was. She let it sit between them exactly as it was. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Elizabeth set down her cup. I need you to understand something. I am not looking for a father. I am not looking for money or a name or access to whatever your world is. I am looking for the truth about where I came from. That is all. That is enough, Jinho said. Is it? Because the truth includes the fact that someone in your family flagged my immigration papers. Someone placed a person in my building. Someone decided that managing me quietly was easier than acknowledging I exist. Jinho held her gaze. I know. Did you do it? No. But you know who did. He said nothing, which was its own answer. Elizabeth nodded slowly. Then that is the first thing that needs to be resolved. Not the relationship, not whatever this is between us. That. It will be resolved. Before I agree to anything else, before I sit across from you again, before I tell Florence this meeting went well. She looked at him directly. Fix it. Jinho arrived at Sunj's residence at dusk. The garden was dark, the trimmed hedges reduced to silhouettes against a pale sky. Inside the east sitting room, a single lamp was burning. Sunj was at his desk, with reading glasses low on his nose and a document open in front of him. He did not look up immediately. Jinho placed the folded DNA report on the desk between them and waited. Sunj finished what he was reading, removed his glasses, looked at the document without touching it. Then at his son. "You already know what it says," Jinho said. "I know what you believe it says. 99.9994%. His voice was level, completely level. "That is not belief. That is fact." Sunj picked it up. Read it with the same expression he applied to investment documents. Set it back down. "She is a complication," he said. "You used that word once before, 24 years ago, to a 23-year-old woman who had done nothing except love the wrong person." Something shifted almost imperceptibly in Sunj's posture. "I protected this family," he said. "You buried my daughter. You were 20 years old, reckless, entirely unprepared for what that child would have cost this family." Her name was Han Yejin. Jinho's voice dropped, which was considerably more dangerous than if it had risen. "She died in a car accident 7 years ago, believing I had abandoned her, because you made certain she would believe that." Sunj looked at his son for a long moment. "What do you want from this conversation?" "I want you to understand that it is over. The immigration flag will be cleared by morning. The person in her building will be removed tonight. And if I find one more move made against her," he paused, "I will dismantle what you built before I inherited it, starting with what you value most." The lamp cast warm light that the conversation did not deserve. Sunj said, "You would do all of that for a girl you have met once." "She is not a girl." Jinho picked up the document from the desk and placed it back inside his jacket. "She is my daughter. You will not make that mistake again." He left without waiting for a response. Sunj sat alone in the lamplight. He looked at the space on the desk where the document had been. Then he looked at the dark garden through the window. For the first time in 40 years of managing this family's complications, he had the particular and unfamiliar sensation of having arrived too late. Elizabeth's phone showed the immigration portal at 7:43 the following morning. Status updated. Review resolved. Authorization confirmed. She stared at the screen for a moment. Then she set her phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood in the early morning quiet of her apartment. Outside the window, Seoul was gray and beginning. Traffic building. The city assembling itself for another day. She picked the phone back up and sent one message. "It's been cleared. Thank you." She did not wait for a response. Jinho read the message in the back of his car on the way to the compound. He set the phone down and looked out the window at the city passing. He had 44 years of practice at not feeling things in the presence of other people. Alone in the back of a moving car, with no one watching, he allowed himself a moment of something he could not immediately name. Not relief, something quieter than relief. Something that had no clean word in any language he spoke. He picked the phone back up and called his legal team. "I need documentation prepared, financial provisions, security arrangements, a full legal structure." A pause. "For my daughter." He ended the call. Sunj called an emergency board meeting at 9 that morning. He did not tell Jinho. The boardroom was on the upper floor of the Park family's main corporate building in Junggu, floor-to-ceiling glass. The city spread below it in every direction. 7 board members arranged around a long table when Jinho arrived and found the meeting already assembled. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "Read the room." Then he walked in and took his seat at the head of the table. Sunj sat at the far end. His expression was composed and certain in the way that expressions become certain when a decision has already been made. He addressed the board without looking at Jinho. He framed it carefully. An internal investigation had revealed that the head of the family had been making unilateral, financial and legal decisions based on an unverified personal matter. Decisions that represented a potential destabilizing risk to the business. He proposed a temporary restructuring of operational authority pending review. He used measured language and a calm voice, and every word was a precise instrument aimed at a single outcome. The board listened. Several members shifted in their seats. One reached for his water. Jinho let him finish. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a document on the table in front of him. Not the DNA report. A different document. Thicker. Prepared. Before the board votes, he said, I would like everyone to read page 4. He slid it to the member on his left and waited while it moved around the table. Page 4 outlined a complete restructuring of the Park family power structure. Operational authority consolidated under Jinho alone. Sunj's role reduced to advisory with no executive function. Every signature required had already been obtained through the legal channels Sunj himself had established 30 years ago. The board read it in silence. Jinho looked at each of them in turn. This family has buried inconvenient truths for 3 generations. That ends today. No one spoke. The vote took 4 minutes. The restructuring passed. Sunj sat at the far end of the table and looked at his son across the full length of it. His hands rested flat on the table in front of him. His expression did not break, but his hands, which had never once in 40 years betrayed him, were very still in the way that hands become still when the body has nothing left to manage with. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the room without speaking. Jinho watched him go. He did not feel triumph. He felt the particular weight of a thing that has been necessary and costly in equal measure. He sat in the boardroom after the others had filed out and looked at the city below the glass. Enormous and indifferent and entirely unaware. That evening, his phone rang. Elizabeth. He answered. Florence told me what you did, she said. The board meeting. It needed to happen. I know. A pause. I'm not calling about that. He waited. I've been sitting here thinking about my mother, about what it cost her to build a life after everything that was taken from her. She did it anyway. She did it well. Elizabeth's voice was steady but carried something underneath it that had no performance in it at all. I don't want to waste what she built by being afraid of this. Jinho said nothing for a moment. I'm not asking for a father, she continued. I'm not asking for your name, or your world, or any of it. I'm asking for the truth to be the thing we start from. That's all. That's where I want to start too, he said. Outside her window, the Seoul skyline held its lights against the dark. Inside the apartment, the quiet was different from the quiet of previous evenings. Less like absence. More like space. Then don't disappear, she said. I won't. She ended the call. Jinho stood alone in his office. The surveillance monitors cycled through their angles. The compound held its managed silence around him. Everything exactly as it had always been. Except that for the first time in 24 years, something inside it had shifted towards something he had not allowed himself to want. Not the empire. Not the control. Not the architecture of power he had spent his entire life perfecting. Just this. A phone call from his daughter, and the possibility of a next one.
Elizabeth came to Seoul for work. She found something nobody planned for. And Jinho just chose his daughter over an empire his family spent 3 generations building. Now I want to hear from you. Was Florence right to walk into that compound alone? Or did she put Elizabeth in danger the moment she did? And what did this story teach you? Maybe it was about the cost of silence. Maybe it was about what real protection actually looks like. Whatever it was, drop it in the comments because I genuinely want to read every single one. If this story held you from that first nod to that last phone call, do me a favor and share it with one person tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. They will not regret it. And if you are new here, welcome to First Epic Tales by Liam.